بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسول الكريم أما بعد اللهم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Alhamdulillah, we will be carrying on today with our discussion first of all with regards to the ihram, which is the first from amongst the arkan of the umrah. We find that ihram probably is the one most important rukun of the umrah, because one is required to be in the state of ihram for the remainder of all the other requirements of the umrah. It's the donning of the ihram, the performing of the tawaf, the performing of the sa'i, the tahleel, which means to cut or shave the hair in the case of the men, and in the case of the ladies to trim the hair, and then also to do those actions in the required tartib. And as we've had with regards to the ihram, that there's three components to the ihram, one being the intention, second being the clothing, and then third is that the person comes into the state of ihram. Connected to that also is that a person needs to go into the state of ihram or be in the state of ihram from a particular place which is referred to as the miqat. So the ihram is a rukun of the umrah. To go into the state of ihram from the miqat is from the wajibat of umrah. Meaning that if a person does not go into the state of ihram, referring essentially to the intention of the ihram, just like if a person does not make intention for salah, and he says Allahu Akbar and performs the entire salah, but without an intention for salah, then such a salah is not regarded as valid, it's not regarded as salah. So similarly, when we speak about the ihram component as a rukun, we are essentially referring to the intention of the umrah that must be made at a particular point in time, particular place. So the person then has to perform this rukun of the umrah, which means to make the intention to go into the state of ihram for the purpose of umrah, and from that point onwards, certain things becomes impermissible to the person. Then to do that from the miqat is a wajib of the umrah, which means that if a person does not make the intention and go in the state of ihram, there is no umrah. If a person does so, but after the person has crossed the miqat, then there's one of two options. He can fix it. Number one is he must go back to the miqat and go into the state of ihram from there. Alternatively, the person has to pay a penalty in the form of a dam. Then we have now the sunnah actions associated with the ihram, and we did deal with this, but I'm just doing a bit of a recap. Then we will come to understand that wearing the clothing for the men, that white clothing, is a sunnah. But if one leaves it out, then there is also a penalty that has to be paid, specifically with regards to the clothing of the ihram. If one violates the clothing of the ihram, then you become liable for a penalty. So amongst the other sunnah actions of the ihram, it is sunnah to perform a ghusl, a major ablution, before going into the state of ihram, and it is preferably between you can either do so at the time of leaving your home. So in the case of the women folk, for example, you understand, and the men folk can do the same if they know that there's not going to be enough time for them because they're going to travel via Jeddah. So traveling via Jeddah, they're not going to necessarily have long enough on the airport where they will be stopping in order to take a sunnah ghusl, to perform the 2 raka'at sunnah associated with donning the ihram, and to don the clothing of ihram. They won't have enough time for all of that. So in the case of the ladies, for example, they can make their sunnah ghusl at home before traveling. They can make the 2 raka'ats before traveling, and they can even put on the clothing and go into the state of ihram from there already. The only thing is that once they go into the state of ihram from there, it is not necessary to go into the state of ihram from the point of the miqat. What is necessary is that you must be in the state of ihram before crossing the miqat. So if you go into the state of ihram, for example, one of the ladies from their homes already, then there's no problem in that. It might make it easier for you because you won't necessarily require all of that time. If you're traveling, for example, with an airlines and you'll only have 1.5 hours or 2 hours from the time you land until your departure, then actually you only have enough time to get from where you land until your boarding gate, because those airports are big. It requires time. You have to go through the immigration. So you have to carry your hand luggage with you. So it's not easy to move from the one area to the other area. So in those instances, for the ladies, it's easy. For the men, if they are comfortable in putting on the clothing of ihram from their homes and traveling like that for the entire journey, no problem. Because if you're going to put it on at the airport, you're in any case going to travel from the airport, until wherever you go, in the clothing of the ihram. Alternatively, you do your sunnah ghusl at home, especially if you're going to travel via Jeddah. If you're traveling via Medina, then it's no problem, because then you'll have opportunity to do all of that in your hotel in Medina before you come into Makkah. But then what you can do, if you're a male person, you can do your sunnah ghusl, you can do your 2 raka'ats, but you don't go into the state of ihram. The ladies can do so, but obviously understanding then that from that point onwards, all of the prohibitions of the ihram will apply to you from the moment you make that intention and go into ihram until you eventually release yourself from ihram after you've completed your umrah. So that is quite a period of time, but it's perhaps the more convenient way to do it. Because if you don't do it at home and you want to do the sunnah ghusl, if you don't do the sunnah ghusl, then there is no harm upon you. You understand? And if you don't do the 2 raka'at sunnah salah, then there's no harm upon you. It will not nullify your umrah, or you won't be liable for a penalty if you don't do it. However, it is more preferred because it is the sunnah of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So a person must therefore be practical. And in order for him to be able to be practical, again, as I mention all the time, you must be aware of your traveling arrangements. You must know your itinerary. You understand? You are traveling from here until that. Which airlines you're traveling with, because that will tell you which country you'll be going to, because you'll be using what they refer to sort of as an interchange. So all of the flights for a particular airlines goes to a particular country, and then from that country again you will eventually go either to Makkah or Medina. For the ladies it might be a bit easier than for the men because of the clothing. So then if the men have done the ghusl at home, they've done the 2 raka'ats at home, then it means that when they come to the interchange airport, and the time is short, they don't need to worry about still having to go and take a ghusl and making the 2 raka'ats. They can simply take wudu and ensure that they then, go into the ihram clothing. And then before they cross the miqat, because as I mentioned, the pilot will tell you that we're about to cross the miqat. Those who are intending to perform umrah, they need to make the intention. And then you make your intention, and then you will be in the state of ihram. Then you'll be in the complete state of ihram. The ladies, obviously, they can do all of that from home. Otherwise, they can just do the sunnah, do the ghusl, put on the clothing, and then wait until they are in the aeroplane and the pilot says to them, we are now coming to the miqat. Then they make the intention there at that time, and then from that moment in time, they will go into the state of ihram. So a person does not go into the state of ihram because he's putting on the clothes. He only goes into the state of ihram once he makes the intention. When he makes the intention of performing the umrah, from that point in time, وَأُحِمْتُ لَهَا, and I'm going to the state of ihram, because it is from that point in time when the limitations of the ihram will apply to the person. Right? Any questions on that? Is that clear? Depending on how you travel, if you're flying via Jeddah and going straight to umrah, my recommendation is you do your sunnah ghusl at home, you do your 2 raka'ats at home. The ladies can even put on their clothing, or they can put on normal traveling clothing, and then once they arrive there, they will go to their hotels normally, and then they can have a change of clothing. But as for the men, they can put on their ordinary clothing, but before they cross the miqat, they will have to ensure that they go into the ihram. They will have to ensure that they go into the ihram clothing rather. And then when they make the intention, you go into the state of ihram, inshallah. Also that this sunnah ghusl is also sunnah for a lady, even if she is in a state of her haid. And then perfuming the body, not the clothing. Not the clothing of the ihram. The body, you can put, perfume, you can put on your underarm, etc. after you've taken that ghusl. And for ladies also, they can put on henna, but no patterns. And then actually what is normal when we do ghusl also, that we remove, the pubic hair and the hair under the arms, etc. We trim the fingernails, the toenails, trim the mustache, etc. Those are all general actions which are associated with taking ghusl. So now in particularly also when one goes into the state of ihram, these are also all sunnah actions for a person to do. And then in the case of the men, then they have to put on sandals. From the Shafi mother perspective, the top of the foot and the heels must be open. For ladies, they can wear ordinary shoes, they can wear tekkies also, and they can wear ordinary clothes also. But for the men also, then there's the izar and the rida, the bottom part and the top part. And of course, we understand that that is then worn without any other clothing underneath. Okay, so for the woman wearing the ordinary clothes, except for the hands and the face, which in the state of ihram is required to be open. As for the ladies, as I mentioned, they normally wear like a pea cap, and then they have like a veil hanging in front of it to ensure that this is now the ladies that are normally in niqab. So but when you're in the state of ihram for umrah, then it is considered that a person should be more aware of Allah Ta'ala, more conscious of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. You understand? So even in the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Prophet Sallam, there were ladies who were wearing it. So Nabi Sallam said to them, a lady in ihram, she should not cover her face, nor should she wear gloves. And we are expecting, although unfortunately we are living in difficult times when people don't have that degree of consciousness of Allah and taqwa and piety, but it is actually expected that a lady should be safe, you understand, and that she should be safe of fitna in terms of having her face and her hands open. So then also performing 2 rakat sunnah before going into the ihram, provided that the time which it is done is not a time when it is haram for a person. There's 3 times: at sunrise, at zawal, and at sunset, when it is not permissible for a person to make any sunnah salah. And the people who are within the precincts of Makkah, they can perform their salah at any time, because when they are in the precincts of Makkah, we don't consider the principle of hurmatul waqt to apply. So a person should, whatever Qur'an he recites in his salah, he should read so softly. Even if he's performing his salah at night, it is recommended that a person should read Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun and Qul Huwallahu Ahad. In the first raka'at, 2 raka'ats, first raka'at, it is also sunnah for a person to read Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun and Qul Huwallahu Ahad. And then also for the 2 raka'ats after Maghrib Salah, it is also sunnah for a person to read Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun and Qul Huwallahu Ahad. So it's a practice that we want to try to inculcate. Although we find that generally the sunnah salah will be regarded correct, even if a person does not read those 2 surahs. But obviously it is more preferred that we should read those surahs. And then to perform the talbiyah, doing so in a calm manner, and for the men to slightly raise their voices, and for the ladies to do so silently. The talbiyah obviously, labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, innal hamda wa ni'mata lakal mulk la sharika lak. Oh Allah, I am here, I present myself. And then it is expected and hopeful that when we do the labbaik, Allah Ta'ala responds to us. And Allah Ta'ala responds, Allah Ta'ala says, labbaik ya abdi wa sa'adik. Oh my slave, I am here and I am in your service. And we don't want Allah Ta'ala to respond by saying, La labayka lak. No, we say, oh Allah, I am here. Allah says, La labayka lak. No response for you. Wala sa'adik, and I will also not help you. May Allah Ta'ala, not grant us to be from amongst those people. So then actions which are forbidden in the state of ihram, actions which are forbidden in the state of, there are certain actions which are forbidden for a person to do, and they fall into different categories. They fall into different categories. So there are certain acts and behaviors that are forbidden for the person who is in the state of ihram, as long as that person is in that state. But these actions which are forbidden for us in the state of ihram, some of them we should actually try to, keep out of our life one time. Although it is considered to be actions that will spoil the ihram, it is such actions which we are better off. Like Allah Ta'ala tells us in the Qur'an also that when a person goes for Hajj, La rafatha wa la fusuqa wa la jidala fil Hajj. La rafath. Rafath means lewd conduct and interaction between the husband and wife. Now those are things that are private. So things that are supposed to be private, you don't do in public. You understand? Things which are supposed to be in private between husband and wife. But nowadays people have become so regrettably shameless that, if we look at how some people conduct themselves when they are even in public, subhanallah. Wala fusuq. Fusuq means that a person knowingly does wrong things. Fisq means to knowingly do things which are prohibited. So those things which we know are prohibited by the Sharia, we should try to avoid those things, in private and in public. Wala jidal, in arguments, unnecessary arguments. You understand? So when it comes to arguments, there was one father, his two sons were having an argument. So both of them came to the father, and both of them wanted now the father to take their side. So the father looked at the one son, and the father said to him, you know what? You are right. You are right. And he turned to the other son and said to the other son, but you are not wrong. You are right, but you are not wrong. And very often when it comes to matters within our Sharia and matters of Masail, then we will find that to be the case. One is right, but the other one is not wrong. Sometimes it's merely a matter of what is preferred under certain circumstances, rather than a matter of what is right and what is wrong. You understand? So we should not always make everything a matter of right and wrong. And then also when it comes to being right and wrong, there's a big difference between being righteous and being self-righteous. Righteous means that I sincerely try to do the right thing. I sincerely try to do the right thing. Self-righteous means that I believe only I am doing the right thing, nobody else. And then I believe that I can now condemn everybody else because only I'm doing the right thing. That is not a good quality to have. Righteousness, to strive to do the right thing by myself, that is a good quality. But to regard myself only as right and others as wrong, that's a bad quality to have. May Allah Ta'ala protect us from that quality. So there are certain acts and behaviors that are forbidden for the person who is in the state of ihram, as long as he is in that state. These are called the prohibitions of ihram. And this is essentially what ihram means. Ihram means that you become sanctified. You go into a state of hurma, into a state of sanctification, where certain actions which are normally allowed, and some actions which might normally also even be encouraged, are prohibited to the person whilst he is in that state. So if a person in the state of ihram violates one of these prohibitions, there is a penalty due to this violation. Then a person becomes liable for a penalty. So depending on the seriousness of the violation, that will determine what kind of penalty the person will have to come up with. So the forbidden acts of ihram can be classified in terms of the related areas. And they are as follows. A, forbidden acts that are sins and harm other people. Something that is sinful and it is harmful to other people. Prohibitions related to the body of the person himself. Because my body has now become waqaf. It's like I've made myself waqaf. And we all understand that when something is waqaf, it belongs to Allah. So now in the state of ihram, that is essentially what we are doing. We are putting ourselves in such a sanctified state where even we ourselves are not allowed to do whatever we want anymore. We are now governed. We've now become holy. You understand? Not just the holy moly. Everybody becomes holy in the state of ihram. And now we have to be more conscious of Allah Ta'ala, and we need to look at the prohibitions that applies to us. Then there are prohibitions related to the nature of clothing that we may wear. Prohibitions relating to hunting. Now this is perhaps not so relevant for us anymore, because in our time, we generally, as we travel, we are provided with food, or we can buy food. There's enough food places. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ and in the period of time after that, people had to hunt in order to get food to eat. You understand? So this prohibition still remains, because the Sharia is not like it applied in that time, so now it doesn't apply anymore. No, it still applies, because there can become circumstances in which this will still become relevant even in today's time. And we don't know what the future holds. Because in the future it might become such that people will have to resort back to hunting again when they are traveling for Hajj and Umrah. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, and we should not assume that the technological advancements, etc., that we have today has made the Sharia obsolete. No, the Sharia remains. You see, people change, things change, times change, places change, but the Sharia doesn't change. Because the Sharia is valid for all times. How the Sharia is to be applied at any particular time, that we seek the guidance of our qualified, competent scholars. But we don't change the Sharia. The problem we have today, we are living in a world where when the people's conduct changes, then they change the law also. Something that was unlawful 100 years ago is not even, besides not being unlawful anymore, it's not even frowned upon anymore. You understand? It's not even frowned upon anymore. If you take 100 years ago, if a person was gay, the person would have been either executed, or the person would have been put in jail. The person would have been, some criminal penalty throughout the world existed for such people. Now today, so normal. And the laws have been changed to accommodate that, even though that is actually a minority group. They are a minority group. But the world has changed their laws in order to give such importance to such people's rights that it seems as though everybody is actually like that. You understand? But that is simply to make it seem normal so that more people will be encouraged into it. But now the laws have changed. Has our Sharia changed? No. Our Sharia don't change in accordance with people's actions. People are required to change their actions in accordance with the Sharia. Why? Because the Sharia refers to that standard of conduct by means of which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge people, and Allah will either become pleased with people or will become displeased with people. It is Allah's Sharia. And Allah is not, like in one ayah of the Qur'an, Allah Ta'ala, when shaitan says that he's going to mislead the people, it's like Allah Ta'ala says to him, no problem. If they follow you, la amna anna jahannama minkum ajma'in. It's not a problem for Allah. If all of us disobey Allah Ta'ala, doesn't affect Allah Ta'ala's greatness. It doesn't make Allah Ta'ala worried. It doesn't make Allah Ta'ala feel sad. Oh, my slaves are not obeying me. No, Allah's unaffected. Allah got a simple rule. You obey me, I put you in Jannah. You don't obey me, there's another place for you. Allah says, La amla anna jahannama minkum ajma'in. If to shaitan, Allah says, if you and all of the people in the earth rejects me and disobeys me, no problem, I'll simply put all of you in Jahannam. So we should not ever assume that our obedience is needed by Allah, and that our obedience will make Allah greater. Allah is unaffected. Nor should we assume that our disobedience will affect Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala is great in Himself. He doesn't need us to make Him great. And Allah's greatness is such that our disobedience doesn't affect Him also. That's why Allah Ta'ala says that if all of you had to come like the most pious of people, it will not increase my kingdom in any way. And if all of you have to become like the worst person, then it will not also diminish my greatness in any way. That's Hadith Qudsi in the meaning of it. So Allah Ta'ala is unaffected. So our Sharia does not change. This ruling relating to hunting, even if people don't hunt from now until the Qiyamah, when going on Hajj anymore, the ruling won't change. The ruling will stay there. You understand? Because our Sharia does not change for the fancy of people. Because nowadays, people want the laws to change in accordance. And if you see very nicely, then you will find drugs were haram. And what is drugs now? Takha. Is it still haram? In the Sharia, it's still haram. But in our laws, zina was haram. What is zina now? Drinking wine is haram. What is drinking wine now? In our Sharia, the rulings have always remained the same. But in the laws of people, they've changed all of their laws to make what is haram permissible. Now, our Sharia doesn't do that. Our Sharia doesn't budge. You either comply with the Sharia, willingly, happily. That is what a Muslim is. What is a Muslim? The one who submits his will to the will of Allah. The one who submits his will to the will of Allah. You either do that, and if you don't want to, and you want to oppose the Sharia, whose Sharia is it? Allah Sharia. No problem for me. You want to go against Allah Sharia? Then you can do that. But you must then be prepared to accept for what Allah Ta'ala does in return. How Allah deals with you in return. And the sad part of it all is that for all of these transgressions and disobedience that people are committing throughout the world, in the media, they only portray the happy side of it. They don't portray the depression that comes with it. They don't portray the instability in people's lives and homes that comes with it. They make it seem as though all of the people in the world are happy in their disobedience. But that is not the case. That is why the world is in the state that it is today. The world is in the turmoil that it is today. People are suffering from depression all over. People are in sadness. People are in problems. It's financial problems, economic problems, emotional problems, psychological problems. The world is in chaos. And why is that? Because we've moved away from what Allah Ta'ala has told us to do, and we've gone into every form of transgression. And then we think that Allah Ta'ala will make us happy. And they portray to the world also. No, this person is so happy. He does every form of haram. No, it's only in the pictures that they are happy. It's only in the movies that they are happy. But behind the scenes, in their actual real lives, in their actual homes, they are extremely unhappy people. Because why? Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. With the remembrance of Allah, hearts find contentment. So a heart that is not remembering Allah can never ever be contented, irrespective of what can have of the material means. And then there will be people who have very little. They don't have all of those other niceties in the fancy houses, in the fancy cars, in the fancy jobs, and a lot of money. They don't have that. But they've got Allah and Allah's Rasul. Like a person, he came to Rasul, he said, "Oh Nabi, well, I don't have much of the dunya, except I love Allah and Allah's Rasul. Except I love Allah and Allah's Rasul." And that was enough. And that contentment, that brings a person happiness. That brings peace. That brings joy. That removes worry and stress and sadness. The number one killer in the world today is stress. It is stress. And the number one cause of stress is the disobedience of Allah. The disobedience of Allah. May Allah give us tawfiq. I know I went a bit in a tangent now, actually, but it's just coming to the point that we are speaking about hunting. So somebody can ask, why do we still need to discuss hunting? People don't hunt anymore. We are discussing it because it is the Sharia. And the Sharia don't change. Okay, and then there are certain prohibitions relating to the haram area. So the prohibitions that are sins and harm other people. Allah Ta'ala tells us in the Holy Qur'an and warning the believers in this regard. Allah says, "And whoever undertakes the pilgrimage فَمَنْ حَجَّ الْبَيْتَ فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. That whoever undertakes the journey of pilgrimage, then such a person should abstain from lewdness, from all wicked conduct, and from quarreling arguments. So what is rafath? La rafath. What is rafath? It is forbidden to the person who is in the state of ihram to have sexual relations or do actions which might lead up to it, such as kissing and direct genital contact, or say things that might make one have sexual desires. In other words, anything related to intimacy. Now, this is prohibited between a halal husband and wife. This is what is prohibited. The Sharia in the state of ihram technically makes the husband and wife haram for each other with regards to intimacy. A husband and wife becomes haram to each other with regards to intimacy. Now, if this is the case for a halal husband and wife, what about the other people? What about the other people? So the lady in the state of ihram should therefore not be, flirting with other men, and the man who's in ihram shouldn't also be flirting with other women. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires you to, why? Because Allah ta'ala, via the state of ihram, wants you to have a sense of exclusivity for Allah. I'm here only for Allah. Even my wife, even you are on your own. I can remember when we went for Hajj, and we came in, I told my wife, Titi, there is no op jou eie. Dis nou tussen jou en jou Allah. This Umrah is between you and your Allah, as it is between me and my Allah. I'm here to assist you as much as I can. But other than that, ek het niks met jou te doen nie. Dis amper soos Qiyamah. Qiyamah, parents are going to say to children, no, don't come to me, I got nothing to do with you. Children are going to say to parents, no, don't come to me. Umrah is like that, because Umrah is where you go and commit yourself to Allah. You assist one another to the extent that you can, but not where, any spark starts flying. So therefore also you are not allowed to get married in the state of ihram. You're not allowed to get married in the state of ihram. And if one concludes a marriage contract while being in a state of ihram, such a marriage is null and void. Now there was a video that circulated some time ago about a couple in the haram of Makkah performing a nikah. It was extremely irresponsible of them, because they were wearing the clothing of ihram, and they were in the masjid of the haram, and there was an imam also in a state of ihram, and the father of the girl was also in a state of ihram. But the reality is that those people were not in the state of ihram. They were wearing the clothing of ihram, but they had already concluded the umrah. So this was very misleading, because now it makes it seem so now the whole world was, is it allowed for you to perform, nikah in ihram, and the nikah is invalid? And only afterwards it was clarified that they had already completed the umrah and they were out of the state of ihram, although they were still wearing the clothing of ihram. So this was very misleading, and it was actually very irresponsible, because now it put the whole ummah in a spin. So a person in the state of ihram, he also cannot be a witness to a marriage, etc. So he can have nothing to do with nikah. And then fusuq means disobeying Allah Ta'ala by performing any forbidden act, although certain actions are forbidden at all times. You understand? So certain actions are forbidden at all times. The prohibition against them is all the more emphatic. In other words, all the more emphasized and disliked during the time of the Hajj. Swearing. Like one person, he said, they were traveling with people, and so whilst the people, they checked into the hotel and they were ready to go for the Umrah, and then an argument broke out and people started swearing each other in the state of ihram. And we Cape Townians is baie gou, you understand? And then these vulgarities, but these are things that's, number one, it is generally not suitable for us as Muslims. It shouldn't be part of our behavior, it shouldn't be part of our character, etc., to be vulgar. You understand? And to be rude in terms of our speech. You know, that's why the beautiful Arabic saying that says, Innal kalama la fil fuadi, wa innama ju'la lisanu ala al-fuadi dalila. What a person speaks comes from his heart. The tongue is only a proof of what is in the heart. So if you are a person that generally swears, and in all of your speaking, you speak to your spouse, you swear. Your spouse does something wrong, cannot fucking die, and the children, yalla pokken all over. Ya salam. You understand? That's a sign of your heart, man. There's something wrong with your heart. That's why you speak like that. Sê, ja, maar julle moenie vir my. Maar hulle het 'n vloekie. You're the one that's swearing. You can't say because of what they know. Because one thing that one of the biggest lessons I learned whilst working for a particular company, and I'm grateful, for the time that I spent there, but the one big lesson that I learned from the owner of that company is, you've got no control over nobody besides yourself. No control over nobody besides yourself. And the only thing that you are responsible for is your own action and your reaction. You are responsible for your own actions, and if somebody does something else, you are responsible for your reaction to him. You can't blame him for your reaction. If his conduct is bad, your reaction must be good. Because you are in control of that. You can't say that because he did, I did. Sy het my kwaad gemaak, toe klap ek. Inna lillah. When she made you angry, you should have given her mouth. When she made you angry, you should have diffused the situation. Or when he made you angry, you did that. No, we are responsible for our own selves. And we have to make an assessment. This is what is happening now, but what is it that is expected from me? What does Allah want from me now? This person has made me... Allah het uitgesit my broer, ek moet maar over jou uitvloek. No, Allah doesn't decree lewdness. Allah doesn't want lewdness from us. Allah doesn't want vulgarity from us. Allah Ta'ala wants us, and especially in the state of ihram, we must be like malaika. We must be like كَأَهْلِ السَّمَاءِ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ. We must be like the people of the sama, like the malaika. We're just walking on the earth. And that is why ihram comes with a sense of consciousness. I must know. Somebody says, Buta kanala man, ek is in ihram man. Titi maaf maar, ek is in ihram. Gaan titi maar, doen titi maar titi voel, maar ek is in ihram. Moenie my pols voel nie. Ya salam, ya salam. So we have to be aware that we are in ihram. Be conscious that we are in ihram. You understand? So fusuq, also being altered by performing any forbidden act. Certain acts are forbidden at all times, and the prohibitions against them are just more emphasized when we are in Hajj or Umrah. It's actually in the state of ihram. So jidal, this is forbidden. It is forbidden to be argumentative and contentious with companions, servants, and others. This jidal very often comes in due to the quality of self-righteousness. A person who is content with being righteous is a person who tries to avoid arguments. But the person who believes self-righteous, he will say, maar ek sê dan, is dit nie so nie, Moulana? Ja, salam. Nou is die Moulana ook so maar stak in die ding. En nou wil die Moulana, die ding diffuse so om vir niemand te sê, hulle is verkeerd ookie. You understand? But if somebody is doing something, then I see you doing that, but I learned this like this. The person says, no problem, that is how you learned it, no problem. My thing is a very simple thing. It is your salah, it is your fasting, it is your umrah, it is your hajj, it is between you and Allah. if I see you doing something different to how I understand it to be done, I will nicely tell you, Buddha, if you come to ask me, I'll say, look, according to my understanding, but I might be wrong. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah's position was always, I am right with the possibility of being wrong, and somebody else is wrong with the possibility of being right. His position was never, I am alone right. Only I know what is right. Only how I do it is right. Only how my teacher taught me is right. There's a story of a very famous scholar from India. He wrote a book on Hajj, but he never went for Hajj. So when he came for Hajj, he went tawaf the wrong side. So the people stopped him. They told him, Sheikh, but where are you going? They told him, no, you're going the wrong side for the tawaf. He says, no, it's right. How do you know? Told him, no, because we learned it. They showed him his own book. From his book, people learn how to perform correctly. But because of his lack of experience, when he did it, he went the wrong way around. But he was prepared to accept. He said, no, it was my mistake. And then he carried on doing it the right way. So if somebody does something in a way different, say, look, this is how I understand it must be done. This is how I learn. And the person says, nee, but this is hoe ek geleer het. No problem, Buddha. No problem, Titi. That's how you learn. No problem. You carry on. I do according to how I learn. You want to go, you learn. Because it is possible that both are right. It's not always, as I say, a matter of right and wrong. So under all circumstances, we try to avoid arguments. You understand? And especially when it comes to the Masail, it is amazing that when it comes to, you tell the person, you open the Qur'an, just randomly ask the person, read the Qur'an, he can't read the Qur'an. But then these other people are busy arguing about the Masail. You understand what I'm saying? People know the basic things in deen the people don't know, but then they want to discuss. They don't ask, a scholar or somebody to, what is the position. No, they believe they can decide for themselves and argue for themselves. So try at all times. And when you are traveling, you can be rest assured you will definitely be tested. They will test you to your last nerve. You understand? Because Allah Ta'ala purifies us. Allah Ta'ala prepares us. At the airport, from the time you leave home, from the time you're going to leave home, something goes wrong. Children don't do this, and that one don't do that, and this is not like this, and that is. You must just ufawidu amri ilallah. I put my matters in the hands of Allah. Now you're at the airport, and this isn't right, and the case is overweight, and that isn't like this, and the last thing you do is argue with people. Say, okay, sorry, what must I do? What must I do that? And you save yourself a whole lot of unnecessary stress. No, but not getting involved in the arguments. So the next category are those related to the human body. All right, related to the human body. Now, it is sunnah before the person goes into the state of ihram to trim the mustache, to trim the beard, to make yourself. You're not going to present yourself in Allah's court, man. So make yourself look nice. Make yourself look nice. Understand? In terms of how Allah wants us to know, come with amali trimmings, salam. So, but you make yourself look presentable in the court of Allah, to appear in the court of Allah as a slave. However, once you've entered into the state of ihram, now you are not allowed to cut your hair, you're not allowed to trim your beard, and you're also not allowed to trim your mustache, in the case of the men. You're also not allowed to remove hair from the body. If it is done, coincidentally, mistakenly, then that is no problem. There's no problem in that. But it shouldn't be that there's a hair, now you pull it out. Or you're a person whose hair falls out, now you scratch for the hair to come out. But if it falls out by itself, or it breaks off by itself, then there's no problem in that. Trimming one's fingernails and toenails, in other words, using a nail clip or something to cut it, you do it yourself. If the nail breaks off by itself, then there's no problem. The nail gets caught somewhere and it falls off or it breaks off, no problem. But for you not to go and cut it, you'll see that these are all things which we are encouraged to do before we go into the state of ihram. These are things that are sunnah for us to do before going into the state of ihram. Using perfume such as musk, for example, on one's clothing or body. Once you've gone into the state, before you go in the state of ihram, you take your sunnah ghusl, you put on perfume, your underarm, whatever you want to put on the body, not the clothing. Then you put on your clothing, you perform your 2 rakats of salah. In fact, for most of us, we are not in ihram really for long enough nog klanke op te doen. You understand? We are not in ihram for so long that you will be getting bad odors. We are in ihram actually only for a few hours, a day or a day and a half at most. So when we are doing umrah, on Hajj you might be for a bit longer, 2 days. But it's not really, I find it very strange when people make it like it's such a burden. No. See yourself as a person who's fulfilling the commandment of Allah and be happy about it. You get the opportunity to be in the state of ihram. You're having your sins forgiven, subhanallah. Why you want to make it seem like it's so a burden? One person, he was so depressed and only because he couldn't smoke a cigarette. Ya salam, no man. For Allah's sake, that's too much to give up. You can't be happy that you're making that kind of sacrifice for Allah's sake. Subhanallah. In the month of Ramadan, you are sometimes required to go without it for longer. Understand? Because in summer, when the days are long, you have to sometimes 16 up to 18 hours. You are without it. Now in the state of ihram, you make it as if you're going to die now if you don't do this. So once you are in the state of ihram, you can now, after that, you can't put any perfume on your body, nor can you put any perfume on your clothing. You cannot apply kuhul. Kuhul referring to the things that they put in the eyes. No? So dyeing the hair or the beard, remember that we said the ladies, they can do the henna, but all of that is before the ihram. Once you are in the ihram, all of those things becomes prohibited. And then it is considered makruh for a lady to wear henna. This is once she's in the state of ihram. However, if, for example, the lady's got a skin condition, and the henna, in those days, it was used as a means for treating dry hands and these kinds of problems with the hands, etc. So if you've got that kind of problem, then you will be permitted, but it is still preferred not to do so. And so the men in the state of ihram, he can use, because this use of the henna here is actually more related to medicinal use. That it is used as a medicinal use. For example, the person has got a cut. What they call that red thing when you've got, for example, a cut on your hand? Mercurochrome. Now, in the olden days, they didn't have mercurochrome. Then they would use henna to help dry out wounds and so on. So in the case of men, if it was for that kind of purpose, then they can use it. But they're not allowed to use it on their hands and feet. Hands and feet for henna is for the women folk, not for the men. Unless there is a medical reason for the man to use it on his hands and feet. And that's why it says there, as for the use of henna on a man's hands and feet, it is forbidden unless there is a need to do so, meaning that there is a medical need to do so. Hands and feet are used for women, and because why? The general use, besides medicinal, for the henna in the ladies is actually for adornment. It is part of how they make themselves look pretty for their husbands. Because in the olden days, people didn't have nail polish. You understand? In those times, so they used this. It would give color, to the fingers and to the feet. Okay, so prohibitions related to clothing. So wearing any dyed and perfumed clothing. All right. So this doesn't refer to the normal black clothing or white clothing, because black is also, a color. But what this means is, for example, there's white clothing and then you dye it a different color. Or the clothing is, the fabric's color is black and then you dye it a different color. That is not allowed. And for the men wearing something that is stitched, what is meant by stitch means something like this. Stitch means clothing that is made in accordance with the shape of the body. Clothing that is made in the shape of the body, like a shirt. Now, you don't find a piece of material that is naturally in the shape. in order for it to have the shape which got sleeves and it's got a body and a hoodie and pockets, it needs to be cut and sewn together. And when it is sewn together, it becomes stitched together. The pieces become stitched together, so it can become one piece, so that I'm able to wear it like this. So the clothing for men cannot resemble something that is according to the shape of the body, where it was stitched in order to achieve that. And then for the men, covering part or the entire head, the men's head must be open in the state of ihram. If it becomes, coincidentally, or the man is not very, so he sits with his hand, so then, or he uses his ihram. If it's for a slight period of time and the person made away and he removes it again, then no problem. You understand? Then no problem. However, it is for a long period of time, then it can constitute a violation of the ihram, and under those circumstances, the person will become required to pay a penalty, a dam. Number 4, for men wearing something which extends all the way around part or all of one's body, like this with the stitched clothing, a shirt, a trouser, a turban, or a jubbah. Okay, and then women should not cover their hands and faces. It is permissible for them to cover their hands and their faces to cover themselves against strangers. So, for example, the ladies are traveling together, and now there's some strange men coming by, then they can use something to cover their face, or draw something over their face. Then no problem, because it's not going to stay there. It's just temporarily. They take their scarf, they put it over their face, etc., and then remove it and carrying on. No problem. However, the face cover should be like a veil which hangs before her face, but does not touch the face. Okay, this is for the ladies who are in niqab. Then they will have, it's got a very, like the normal pea cap that people wear, like the sports people and so on. They've got that pea cap. Now you get one that's got a fairly big, broad, extension in front. Then the ladies hangs it over there so that it doesn't touch the face. Once it touches the face, it becomes a violation of the requirements of ihram. So men are likewise forbidden to wear regular shoes. You cannot wear regular shoes unless they are unable to find any sandals to wear, in which case they are permitted to wear regular shoes after cutting them out under the upper rim. So in other words, if you have got, you don't have any other shoes, then what you have to do, what we refer to as the tongue of the shoe at the top, you need to lift that up or actually cut it off. But to ensure that you don't violate, you need to lift that up, and the back part or the heel part, you need to have that inside the shoe. You see sometimes the children wear their shoes like that, no? Then they'll put their feet into the shoe, so the parents normally scale, if the child wears the shoes like that, because they spoil the shoes. Then the heat will be folded on the inside so that the heel is open, and the tongue part needs to be raised so that the part of the foot at the top can also be exposed. Then you can wear that. Other than that, it is better for you to wear sandals, better to wear sandals. However, in the case of the ladies, they can wear closed shoes. They can wear tekkies or any other shoes. Any questions with regard to the clothing, either from the men or from the women? Yeah. According to those scholars that say smoking is haram, so then again in the state of ihram, it is then considered to be haram. And then there are those that say obviously that it is makruh, so then for them they will then hold to the position that even in the state of ihram it is makruh, but it is still disliked. It is still better to avoid it. You understand? Because what do you do in the month of Ramadan? The person who smokes, he abstains from the smoking. So it is better than for the person in the state of ihram. Just like, consider that the state of ihram is like from Fajr until Maghrib. You understand? Until you come out of the state of ihram. And the other thing, what is the worst thing about smoking? How it makes you stink. Wallahi. It's a terrible thing to have to stand in salah next to a person that smokes. The sad thing is that person can't smell. Because his senses is dead. His senses is dead. He can't smell. And the smell is on his breath. It's in his mouth. So when he speaks, sometimes, Allah forgive me. Some of the musallis in the masjid, when they want to come greet you, and then they, ya Allah. Now I've got a very sensitive nose. As plat my kan ruik. You understand? And I also suffer from sinus. And one of the worst things for me as a sinus sufferer is cigarette smoke or the cigarette smell. You understand? Now the person he smokes, his hands, then sometimes, when you stand in salah, or somebody shook your hand, hy het nou dit paar vinnige skuwe getrek, buite die hande stink na rook, and on his way to the masjid, he was smoking, sitting in the car, adhan is going off, he's smoking his cigarette finish, he comes in. Some people, because he took wudu at home, so he's not going to wash his hands, scrub sy mond of niks soos daai nie, and then he comes and he takes your hand, and now your hand smells of that cigarette. Ya Allah. Sometimes it makes you nauseous. Or the person, worse, they speak to you. And then you just, no, inshallah. The person not realizing you're wanting to get away from him because his mouth, ya Allah, it's horrible. Wallahi, smoking is a horrible thing for the non-smokers. It's a horrible thing. And the reality is, a smoker is a drug addict. A smoker is a drug addict because he suffers from cravings. He needs to, if he doesn't smoke, he suffers from cravings. His behavior becomes affected. A smoker, in essence, is a drug addict. And you could see that in COVID time. How much did people pay for cigarettes in COVID time? 300-400 rand a packet. Why? Because you couldn't do without it. Why? Because it is a drug. Between that guy, now that guy has got the same symptoms when he doesn't smoke to the other drug addict. It's just that the world, in fact, previously there were scholars that said, when people, the scholars weren't so much aware of the harms of smoking. There has now been confirmed medical studies to confirm the harms of smoking. That is why it is only the scholars who rely on old rulings, that consider that smoking is still just makruh. But you will generally find that a scholar that smokes, he says it's makruh. And those who don't smoke says it's haram. But the majority of the scholars today consider smoking to be haram because you are most definitely doing harm to your body. And for a Muslim to inflict harm to his body is haram. It's not permissible. But for those of us who don't smoke, you come, your hands stink, your clothing stinks, your mouth stinks. Ya Allah. And then we have to deal with you, and you can't smell it, so you don't have a problem, and you think it's hunky-dory. But really, if there is one thing that I could encourage people, besides in ihram, in your life, if you are a smoker, please do your best to give it up. It is an extremely antisocial habit. Extremely antisocial, because one of the most irritating things about smokers, they believe they can light their cigarette anywhere, anytime. Anywhere, anytime. Hulle smaak vir 'n skyf, hulle sê dit, you don't care who you are, where you are. Now, why can't a person in the state of ihram go without? You will know why the person in the state of ihram can't go without a cigarette. Ask the other drug addict. The guys who are addicted to tik, the guy who is addicted to any other drug, ask him why a person in the state of ihram cannot go without a cigarette. And he'll tell you, because he is also a drug addict. And that is the behavior of a drug addict. He can't go without his fix. And then once he thinks, You know, Adhan goes for Maghrib, Ramadan, Darul. Why? What is the smoke? Does the smoke fill your stomach? Why? It's got nothing to do with the stomach. It's got to do with the craving, the nafs. Wallahu a'lam. What's the time now? Okay. It's fine, yeah, it's fine. Provided it doesn't cover the whole heel. Just the strap, no, that will be fine. That will be fine. The other thing also is the discussion about whether or not somebody can wear sandals, the same shoes that you can wear in your ihram. You can do tawaf in it, and you can also do the sa'i in it. It is not a requirement that you must do the tawaf bare feet. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they would make salah on the sand, on the soil. There wasn't a mataf. It was referred to as the mataf, but it wasn't tiled rather. So they would do so on the sand. So in their time, they would wear sandals. They would wear sandals in doing tawaf. They would wear sandals in doing sa'i. They would wear sandals in performing salah. It is only if it was now, they would be outside, they would come into a place that was carpeted. So we are in the masjid without shoes, not because it is a requirement of the salah. It's a requirement for us to help keep the carpet clean. Because if everybody had to come in from the street wearing his shoes into the masjid and, walking in, how would we keep the carpets clean? But if there were no carpets and we had, for example, just tiles, then there wouldn't be an objection to wearing shoes. It's not a requirement for the correctors of salah that you must be without your shoes. You understand? So even if a person, because I know that many people find it challenging, because sometimes because the mataf is all being cleaned, etc. So there's two things in it. Number one is the surface is smooth. So walking, you don't have the same kind of grip as you would normally have when walking on a carpet. So it becomes cumbersome. For some people, it becomes challenging. The other thing also which has been found now in the recent years, people pick up infections on their feet particularly. One of our musallis here from Bonteheuwel, he had to have part of the skin of his foot removed, such that you could see the bone in his feet. Why? Because there was some bacteria or virus or something which he picked up on the mataf, and he was in a hospital where a number of people actually had the same condition, and all of them generally picked it up. Because, so for example, if you're a person who's got sensitive feet, you've got a cut on your feet or something, to do tawaf like that, although they try to keep it clean and disinfected, it becomes problematic. So if you were to ensure that your shoes are clean, and that is why generally they wear those flip-flops, you understand? But if you ensure that your shoes are clean, then there's no harm in you wearing your shoes when you do the tawaf. There's also no harm in you wearing your shoes when you do the sa'i. Now somebody says, but people make salah there. In the remainder of the other floors of the haram where people are only doing tawaf, they're wearing their shoes. You understand? So then people make salah there also. People make salah outside the haram where people are walking. The requirement is just that your shoes must be clean, and the place where you make salah must also be clean. So if your shoes are clean, you can even, if you want to, you can have one pair of sandals that you walk with and another pair of sandals that you're going to wear for the tawaf and the sa'i. You can do that, provided that it is clean. Wallahu a'lam. Any other questions with regard to the clothing? Not sunglasses, but if you are a person that wears reading glasses or sunglasses you need to see, then you can do that. Sunglasses, provided, if it covers too much of the face, if in other words it's so big that it covers the entire top part of the face, then it won't be allowed. But if it is, I suppose, small, then you might, but it is generally not preferred. But if you are a person that wears specs, then you can do that because you require that to see. Marv? If it is, like for example, you normally wear reading, but one of its features is that it turns, no problem, because it's not a sunglasses. That is now for him to decide what he makes of that, not for you. And if he says, then you just say, Ran Buddha, you carry on. Don't get into an argument. Don't try to explain. Because if you were to take it off, would you be able to see and walk properly? You understand? And so the fact that it changes color that is coincidental to its purpose. Whereas the sunglasses, that is not a specs where you need it in order to see. That is the function of the sunglasses. You understand? If it is a sunglasses that is normal for you to see, at least spectacles that you need to see, but it also got the feature with the glass tints, that is coincidental. That is not the function of the spectacles. Sunglasses, that darkness, etc., that is the function of the sunglasses. Prohibitions relating to the haram area. So hunting game refers to free animals that are roaming around freely. Cutting or picking grass in Makkah, in the Makkah precincts, in the haram area, you can't cut the grass there, you can't cut the trees there, you can't take the fruits there. In the haram area, around it, are forbidden to everyone, whether they are pilgrims in the state of ihram or not. So even the people who come there, even the people of Makkah are not allowed to do it. All right? However, certain plants like the one called idhir and the senna leaf, because those are plants that were generally used during those days by the people for their houses. You understand? The idhir and the senna leaf. Senna was used as a herb, and idhir was used essentially for firewood. So those that were generally used by the people, that is not a problem. As well as dried plants and thorny plants are excluded from this rule. It is permissible to trim the trees or take other actions for rehabilitative purposes. So now, the trees are growing out of hand, and if it is left like that, it can become harmful to the people, then it can be trimmed. However, nowadays, obviously, you can't just go there and trim trees, because there's like a local government, and you see that oversees all of those things. So fruits and branches of miswak tree can be plucked, as it is permissible to graze animals, and it is possible to graze animals in the haram area. But you have to ensure that those fruits don't belong to somebody, because if it belongs to somebody, you're not allowed to take it. Okay, so things that are not prohibited for a person to do whilst in the state of ihram, not prohibited. Taking a bath. In other words, if you've taken a ghusl and you've now traveled, you understand, but you've not yet completed your umrah, at any time during that, you can take another ghusl. You can even change the ihram. For men, you can have 2 sets of ihram, and then if needs be, the one is dirty, like in the state, for when people go for Hajj. You understand? Very often people wear 2 sets of ihram. You are in the state of ihram, you're just changing the clothing. And this shower that you take or the bath that you take is simply for the purpose of cleanliness. The only thing is, before the state of ihram, when you take a shower or a ghusl, you can put on perfume. Now when you do so, you can't put on perfume, and you have to use unscented soap. It's supposed to be unscented. No? It is not permissible to use scented soap and shampoo while taking the bath. You understand? Because you can use scented before you go into ihram, but once you've gone into ihram, you can't use the scented. You must use unscented. Changing your ihram clothing or to wash it, because there, even if you were to wash your clothing, sometimes you'll find on Hajj, the guy will go into the shower, he'll come out with his ihram. Also, he'll somehow wash the ihram there in the shower also, comes out, 10 minutes later it's dry. It dries out very quickly. You can use miswak to brush your teeth, pulling off broken nails or like this, things which are harmful. So you pulled the nail and it got torn, so now it will become harmful to you if you leave it. But you didn't tear it off from the beginning, but it got torn somewhere, then you can take it off. Okay, so if you've got now a toothache, got a rotten tooth, you can have the tooth pulled out. Venesection, cupping of the blood is to do cupping on your body. You can have cupping done on your body, provided the hair is not shaved for the purpose. Because you can only shave your hair once you're coming out of the ihram. But now the person is traveling, but now for us, this isn't really so relevant, but this was like for people that were traveling long, but the things are still there. As I said, the Sharia doesn't change. So this person, he now is traveling, he got sick, and then it is recommended for him that for the purpose of helping him with his cure, he undergoes cupping, then the person can do that. So having an injection and getting a wound wrap, that is all permissible. If you are sick, you can get injections. So these are permissible, but, we are obviously cautioning also against it. So wearing rings, watches, glasses, and gas masks. So this glasses refers to the spectacles. The gas mask refers to that kind of mask that the people used to wear in the time of COVID. Why? Because it doesn't cover the entire face. Wearing a watch is also permissible. A money pouch that people wear around and very often they use it to keep up the ihram. So even if the pouch is stitched, it's not a problem, because you're not going to find, generally you can have a pouch without it being stitched. Covering the body with something like a blanket without covering the face and the head. So if it's cold, you can wear an extra blanket, especially for the ladies, they like to wear their shawls, no problem, you can do that, provided it doesn't cover, for the men, the head, and in the case of the ladies, it doesn't cover the face. So taking a jacket or a coat over the shoulders without wearing it. In other words, like the jacket the Hajj is wearing here, but he doesn't put his arms into it, just throws it over his shoulders without putting his arms into it, no problem, in order to help keep warm. So using an umbrella or taking shade of a tent. The umbrella, no problem, but the people, they've got those small umbrellas that they put onto their heads, that you can't wear because that thing becomes fixed to your head. You understand? So even though it is above there, it is considered to be connected to the head, to be regarded to be covering the head. So hunting aquatic animals like fish, you're in the sea there, because people used to come by boat from other countries, Egypt and so on. So if they were to catch fish for the purpose of eating, no problem. So killing animals which are not game. In other words, the people there's a cow or a sheep or a goat, you buy it from them, you slaughter it, no problem. Or you come with your own cow and you carry your own animals with you and you slaughter it for the purpose of food, again, no problem. And also if you were to kill wild animals, then there will also be no problem in doing so. So in that regard, inshallah, we will conclude on that, and then we will carry on again next week. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. Any questions for what we've covered now this week? Alhamdulillah, there's from our community people that will be going for Umrah. Some tomorrow, no? I think it's Auntie Mariam. Auntie Mariam is leaving. Auntie Mariam Solomons, no? Is leaving tomorrow. And then next week is Buta Yusuf Abrams, inshallah, be leaving next week. Sunday, inshallah. So we wish everybody Umrah Maqboolah, and may Allah Ta'ala make their journey for them easy, bring them back home also safely, and take care of their families and their belongings in their absence, inshallah. Wa akhiru dawana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.